Thanks for making the Aussie Gridiron Network a part of your day. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you hit that subscribe button and left us a quick review. Your support helps more listeners discover the podcast, and it means the world to us. Got feedback or ideas? Drop us a line or connect with us on social media at Aussie Gridiron Network. For now, Matty and Taylor aren't here to fuck spiders. Let's get into it.
In the beginning there was nothing, a featureless void. From the formless primordial state, a legend was born when forces combined to create a solid object of significant value. As planets were formed and Earth itself was shaped, the object lay awaiting its destiny. Seas rise and fall, mountains emerge, and upon the highest mountain, an intrepid adventurer happens upon the object. A worthy prize for ascending this to the tallest of peaks. This object has been documented to be held by many of the great dynasties of mankind, from the Persians to the Huns, the Mongols and the Ottomans, lives lost defending it from those who seek to possess it. Now it is in the trust of three wise men who also reach such pinnacles, to be held by he who imparts the most astute knowledge upon fellow mankind. The winner of the annual Aussie NFL Fantasy Show Starts of the Week. But there you go. So that's all our water bets, our preseason calls, our guests' water bets. And mate, the only thing I wanted to touch on that we haven't yet is to do with how starts of the week went. And really, it's a pretty quick thing because we've been recapping this all year. Mate, I ended up walking away with it, mainly thanks to a good start from about week 7 on. I just hit a bit of a purple patch. But but Ian, he brought me home. There's 2 weeks where I was away, unexpectedly one of them, and the other one crooked than hell for the first one, but then the other one on a boat in the middle of nowhere, and he came through for me. That hammered it home, but I felt like I was going to get there anyway. But nice work from Ian. He did a great job filling in for me and in the hosting stuff, but also then in the starts of the week. But mate, I think you would have been a bit disappointed you weren't here for the last week because I feel like your team might have looked a bit different to Kev's.
Yeah, I might have actually picked a quarterback. It would have been great. Yeah, too good. And my boy Jalen McMillan, which I was very pumped about. But yeah, he got unlucky with Anthony Richardson, and then Caleb was just absolutely shit house. So that was the most diabolical game in history, 6-3. I honestly wanted to vomit at the time. No, look, in the end, mate, credit where credit's due. You had an amazing year. It's honestly credit to you. Like, we've obviously done this for 3 or 4 years now, and you sort of persevered with it the entire time, and you've never sort of given up or just sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater and said, this is shit, we'll stop doing it or whatever. Like, you sort of worked hard at it every single year, and honestly, it all came together for you this year, and honestly, you were the best by a mile for most of the year, so you deserved it. Looking forward to bringing that trophy down to you. It's been sitting on my mantle for a little while. So take care of it, mate. It's been fun having it, and obviously I'm going to be coming hard in the paint trying to get it back next year.
Yeah, mate, it'll be Chamberlain versus Bogues in the paint for next year. It's going to be the big guy versus the little guy next year for that. But mate, a quick recap here. I end up with 901 total scoring from the teams I picked over the year and 39 competition points. Tay, you came second in total scoring from your team's players, 895, and the world had 822. But the world pips you on competition points. Just over the course of the year, managed to pick up enough first and seconds to outrun you 31-30. But mate, look, when you do bring that trophy down, I've got a whole bunch of 2-liter water like milk bottles filled with water. We can do all those water bets at the same time, and we'll get a whole bunch of stuff on social media about it, and it'll be a good way to end our season.
Yep, sounds good, mate. Looking forward to it.
Mate, the last thing that we wanted to do before we get out of here is give away some awards, because what's a fantasy season without looking back at the people who did great stuff? And I sent you a little sheet with some of the categories I thought we should talk about and put some people in there. And I don't know how much influence that has on what you wanted to do with it, but I thought I'll throw mine in there just so you can see how I was thinking. But the only one I didn't put anything in for was Fantasy Player of the Year. And I just went, shh, just to keep it a bit of a secret. And then I saw when you sent it back, you'd done the same thing with Fantasy Player of the Year. You're like, nah, not telling you.
Yeah, that's what I just saw your and I was like, okay, well, I'm not saying it.
No, you're right, motherfucker. So look, we dreamt up a bunch of categories, and I think this is the way to go about it is, if you wanted to add another category along the way, I would have been more than happy to. And if you still want to throw in an honourable mention anywhere, let's do it. But mate, we were in super lockstep with a bunch of these. The Fantasy Rookie of the Year, I don't know how you go past it. Do you want to unveil our Fantasy Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, so I'll slowly say it with a drum roll maybe in there. But
put it in.
The fantasy rookie of the year goes to Brock Bowers.
Crowd goes wild.
Unanimous pick from Matty and I. I think it'd be pretty unanimous from everyone. Where you picked him in the tight end position for him to. He actually got pipped, I think, at the end by Kittle. I think he technically was tight end too in just standard format, but in the end, he just was dominant. If you've got him in a dynasty, well done. You've got a guy that's only going to get better year by year and year out. He was going tight end between 12 and 14, I believe, in drafts. You got him so late, and he was just dominant for most of the year. So just kudos to you if you took him in your draft.
100%. I was just wrong. I had him at tight end 16. Wrong. The next category we looked at was the best fantasy draft pick. And I kind of looked at this in terms of, okay, so who do I find myself taking very late who then became a starter for me all the time? And I just thought, given the other players in this range who had the same qualifying factors, I just thought this guy was heads and shoulders above.
I had to go someone else. It was the kind of thing that I kind of looked elsewhere, and I saw your pick first, and I'm like, well, I'll go different, but I love your pick.
Yeah, and it's one of these things too. I got this great shirt for Christmas that my family bought me. So it's all in Jag script. It says "Jagging off," which is hilarious. And so I'm leaning into Brian Thomas because I think he did everything that Malik Neighbours did, not with as many points, but he did it with probably less fanfare. I don't think anyone expected Brian Thomas to be a fringe top 10 wide receiver this year in the way that there were definitely people who I think thought Neighbours would come into the league and hit his stride straight away. I don't think anyone was expecting that for Brian Thomas at the Jags.
Except me with my random premonition that time and just randomly messaged you saying, I've got this awesome feeling about Brian Thomas.
You did? I'd forgotten about this. No, you did. Oh my God, I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, I'd taken him in our FFL Dynasty draft and I just had this feeling about him. Like, he reminded me of a young DK Metcalf. I was just like, I've got a feeling this guy's going to be the pace he runs at for such a big guy. I was like, this guy could be dominant quickly. And
better than advertised.
So, yeah, again, he's another one if you've got him in Dynasty, well done, because I think he's in for a very good career.
I mean, you tell me he's not quarterback proof considering how few people had anything nice to say about Mac Jones 12 weeks ago, 14 weeks ago, 16 weeks ago, and here he is making Mac Jones look serviceable.
Even Lawrence wasn't fantastic. Like, it wasn't like, they lost like this dominant guy. It's Lawrence really wasn't exactly killing it either, like when he was there. So the fact he ends up wide receiver 4 and on this diabolical Jags year, it's honestly amazing.
Unbelievable. Mate, I couldn't disagree at all with the player that you posited either. Make your case and let's talk about the guy you want to celebrate here for draft pick of the year.
Yeah, mate. Look, I went with Baker Mayfield. I just thought for him to finish quarterback 5 where he was getting completely undrafted, like everyone was just assuming that was a flash in the pan last year with the Bucs, and obviously the quarterback whisperer leaving and everything. And I just don't think anyone had the confidence in Godwin that was even ended up getting shown. And I just think everyone thought the Bucs offense was taking us at least 1 or 2 steps backwards from last year, and it really just strength to strength. They were quite consistent, which was not expected. Baker, even when he lost Godwin and then he lost Evans, he still seemed to find a way to actually facilitate. He obviously got Kate Otten more involved, and he just found a way to get it done. And he had less really bad weeks. It was quite consistent, like what you've never seen out of him. I just was really, really proud, and I just thought that was an amazing pick. If you got him either the last pick of a draft or just got him off waivers, near the start of the year, and you were just starting him in any format. Like, you were just playing him in a 10-teamer. He still was dominant. To go a quarterback 5 for the entire year where you got him in the draft, I just thought it was too hard to pass him up as being a top fantasy player this year.
And the reason why I think it's a great call too is he's not your typical break out of the pocket and run it around sort of guy. He's not getting you rushing touchdowns, and he's not picking up as many points through his legs as some of the other guys who find themselves in that top echelon does. So for him to be doing it largely as a pocket passer and to be doing it on depleted weapons where he made Kate Otten a thing for a long time, it's difficult to rally against you. I don't think we need to choose between us. I think we can celebrate both and say draft picks of the year.
100%.
Mate, we then find ourselves with the even tougher situation where we've got to decide who the best fantasy waiver ad of the year is. I went first on the last couple. I'm going to throw you to this one for you to talk about your fantasy waiver ad.
And I looked at this and I said, you know what, I want to go through and just sort of work out what I think this sort of means. And the reason I picked this guy is I believe he was a waiver very early. I think he probably would have been drafted, but there was huge question marks about who was leading this backfield and what it was going to look like. And if you look through this guy's game logs, he scored 3.1 and 3.9 in the first 2 weeks. And I think he would have hit waivers either after week 1 or probably definitely after week 2. And then after that, he sort of just rocket shipped, and then the guy that he was sort of sharing time with just sort of fell apart, and that's Chase Brown of the Bills. I just think if you got him after week 2, that was an enormous waiver wire pickup because he just went off after that. Like he just completely took over from Zach Moss. He sort of had a few games there where he was still sort of sharing with him, but he was putting together the better, yards per carry and everything. He was having 13, 14 points here and there. And then obviously when the Moss injury happened, he just went off. He just had a few 20-point games and he was huge for anyone that had picked him up. So I liked him as like a full season guy. Like if you picked him up in the 3rd week, you got an entire year out of him, whereas there's probably some other guys in the waiver things that killed it at the end of the year, which was great in terms of fantasy playoffs. But you probably didn't get that full year spectrum, so that's the way I went with it. But mate, I love your one too. I'm not definitely trying to.
Oh, and what's annoying about this one is I'm just going to spruik a guy I had 0 shares of because Bucky Irving came out of nowhere. Really, he was somebody who I thought I heard his name maybe twice in preseason, and people saying, just the Bucks love him. They just love him. But I knew Rashad White was the leader in that backfield, and I just knew that he was going to be unchallenged for volume. And while he did start to get challenged for volume, it really only started once he started to niggle a bit. And then all of a sudden he lost all that volume. Later on in the year, it started coming back as he overcame it, but it didn't actually hurt Irving's effectiveness. So, look, I don't think you drafted Bucky Irving, which is, for me, why I thought this was going to satisfy the waiver out of the year. I don't know that you drafted him. You certainly didn't in a 10-team league. But whoever picked him up and hung on to him found themselves essentially a fringe running back one who you could just use as flex. I mean, you could just throw him in your flex and you knew it wasn't going to matter. And the weeks where you had mega buys or whatever, he was easily a running back too. And I'm assuming when we see data on this later on, we're going to find that he was somebody who was on a lot of championship rosters.
That would be surprising.
Now, let's go position by position here because we've talked about some of those guys who just find their way into teams because either they're so new to the sport or there's somebody you threw on late or there's somebody you went and found later. These are the bulletproof ones.
Yeah, look, you can drum roll, I guess, but they're probably not going to be surprising. But you and I were unanimous in the first 3 positions. So I will start with the best fantasy quarterback of the year. Drum roll, pretty short drum roll, please. And it is Lamar Jackson.
Of course it is.
Well, of course it is. He was amazing. He was one that obviously I'd sort of talked down a bit. I didn't think he was going to be horrendous or anything, but I just didn't draft any of him. I put him at 6 in my quarterback rankings, and it was definitely something that I was the most off in the preseason. I just thought that Henry would take more off him. He took a lot, but it wasn't enough. And Lamar was far better in the passing game than I would have ever given him credit for. I think the right offense helped him. They were quicker than they probably have in past years. And Lamar just had an amazing year. That's all you got to put it down to. And anyone who took a shot on him, I know Pete traded for him in that dynasty league that he ended up winning. And anyone that sort of drafted him, even where he going high, it was 100% worth the pick. So amazing fantasy year for Lamar.
There was no pick you could have spent on him that was too high. And I mean, this is the thing, right? With the Derrick Henry thing, you had the people who were like, it won't impact him too much, or the folks who were like, nah, that's a real thing. And it turns out it didn't matter. Poor K, no low dose, right? Like, why don't we have both? And there were a couple of situations like that where one player didn't detract from another. And I mean, gosh, we talked about how some quarterback like production this year in some weeks or some weeks in a row was so great, but none of them came within a country mile of Lamar Jackson, who was number one, but with a bullet and for miles to go, even after you had guys like Josh Allen throwing up 30, 40, 50-point games. So, well, I don't think there's any surprise there. And our running back is kind of the same.
Yep. Yeah, look, probably even smaller drum roll, please. I guess there is probably at least one or two guys you could probably put close-ish to this guy, but look, Saquon Barkley. He was just so dominant. He ended up won pretty easily in the end, obviously, when Henry sort of fell off a little bit at the end, but yeah, Saquon was amazing. It didn't matter that, Jalen Hurts was getting his ass pushed into the end zone from the 1 yard line. Saquon scored enough touchdowns from outside that 1 yarder. The upgrade in offensive line was insane. It just made for him to have an amazing year. The amount of 150, 200-yard rushing games he had was huge. He didn't even have to get involved in the passing game a lot. He had some games where he did, but it really round. He just dominated behind that offensive line, and he had way more red zone opportunities than he ever had at the Giants. Slam dunk pick, absolutely dominant.
Man, now wide receiver, not actually all that different. It's weird because this is a team who've been quasi-successful in terms of, on the NFL field. They've been winning some games, they've been losing some games. They kind of, But, mate, this guy at wide receiver has been just a head and shoulders and most of his torso ahead of everybody else at the position. And it's hard not to love him. To me, he's the new Megatron. Do you want to unveil?
Jamar Chase. Shoulders, knees, and toes above everyone, I think.
Oh, my God.
It was weird. Like, in the first half of the season, he had some sort of off games here and there. But in that second half of the year, he was just so dominant. I remember I was playing against one of my mates, Johnny, and he had Jamar Chase, and we're in a matchup, and I'm like, your ass just puckers up when you're against Jamar Chase. There is no margin you could be in front of him with a game to go that you would be safe.
That's true. He's
the guy that he has a safe floor, but then he has this enormous ceiling as well. He's just kind of one of a kind in that way. Him and Burrow just have that connection with how bad the Bengals defense is. That helps him too. They're just in all these shootouts, and yeah, having Jamar Chase was it was like you had 2.5 wide receivers in one spot.
That's probably correct. I mean, again, you can't take a guy like Jamar too high, and I wrestled with this one because I thought, considering the things that Jefferson was up against in preseason when he knew he wasn't going to be having a veteran quarterback, and then he wasn't even going to be having the highly touted rookie, for him to still be as great as he has been, I thought, gee, that's probably worth a shout. So I'm going to give him an honorable mention, but I mean, it's nothing in the face. You have to take Jamar completely out of the league before we would start talking about Jefferson. So, and I think that's true of each of the guys that we've brought up as position winners here, but not so at tight end. You and I, we diverged here, and I don't think we diverged with massive disagreement here, because I think both the guys we bring up here well worthy to be spoken about. And mate, I'll toss to you first on this one, because tight end is a position that's close to your heart and your ass.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. Love a loose end. Look, I just wanted to give this guy a shout out because I feel like he got a little bit less credit than, another guy that we've obviously already brought up. But I wanted to shout out George Kittle. I just think he was so consistent this year. And the problem I've always had with drafting him is in that Niners team where it's obviously got CMC, a non-shit Debo, Ayuk with, an ACL intact. It's like whenever they've had all these guys together, it's been hard to know. And a Kittle kind of just doesn't get used in the passing game all the time. And this year, I guess, obviously having CMC not there sort of helped, I guess, but he was just for this Niners team. I know they had a shit year on the field, but he was so good and consistent for fantasy, and he was just the number one guy, honestly, week to week for this team. So I just felt like he deserved a shout out in the tight end position, because honestly, I think anyone that picked him around that sort of tight end 5 to 6 range, they got a massive steal. And honestly, I wouldn't have picked that. I would have said, if you're picking Kittle at the start of the year around that's probably what you're going to get, is just whatever you picked him at. And he was so dominant and consistent all year. So, yeah, kudos to him. I think he deserves a shout out, because I feel like he was the best tight end week by week this year.
I do too, because don't you think he just feels like a cardboard cake? It's a fucking cake, but you're not going to enjoy eating it. It's not terribly good, because you're pretty much just getting what you think you're going to get, right? And you're not going to get it consistently. You're going to get it in a 26-point game against some hopeless defense in their division, and then he goes a month where he scores you 9 combined points. That's how Kittle has played, because, as you say, so many contributing factors. She hasn't been that. And when you brought him up, I thought, 100%. I'm not going to disagree with that, even with my love for the 49ers. But essentially, I think the reason why I went the way I did was because, well, he's essentially had the same season, but for another team who didn't have another place to go outside of him as their first option. It was Brock Bowers, who we've had to repeat for me as not just the fantasy rookie of the year, but in his position, I feel like it's very hard to go past him for just the, as you say, targets are an earned stat, and nobody had more in that team, a team who trailed a lot and a guy who put himself in position to be open to accept those targets more than a rookie at a position that is so hard to find great value at. So I don't know that we can split between this and say one's better than the other in any way, shape, or form. I think we just got to celebrate both and say, if you drafted either or you found your way into either of these guys through the year, you had a great year and good on you.
Yep, absolutely.
Best fantasy performance. I don't know anyone's going to be surprised by either of these, Tay. Can I quickly just mention the Josh Allen 750 touchdown game? I don't need to go into a lot of detail. And I'm going to be the one who brings that up.
I think it was like, I think he basically had like, what was I brought up, like probably a top 10 of all-time quarterback performance the week before, and he's just like, nah, I got this. And then also shout out to Josh Allen to fucking having a complete ghost of a performance the week when we needed him. It was like, there was so many like memes about him. It was like, as soon as Josh Allen, we needed him most, he was gone. Like, it was like, seriously, like that was another thing I was bringing up with you before we brought up, like, you know, before we started the show. I was like, I had Josh Allen in like 4 of my semifinals.
Oh my God.
And it was another one of those ones where I was like, game, and I was expecting some like Josh Allen notifications on my phone, and I'm just sitting there tapping my phone going, is this thing on? Like, what the fuck is going on? They're playing the Patriots. Like, how is he not just like getting at least a touchdown and a half? It was like, what the fuck is going on? And he just killed anyone that had him. Like, it was absurd. Like, I had a dominant Kelly Cup team, and my brother in Pete's league, and I was like 12-2 or something in the regular season. I got bounced.
Oh my God.
Josh Allen was sort of like the train that pulled me there, and I just got destroyed by him. It was just one of those things.
Yeah, and I thought we were heads up. We were the favourites in our semi-finals in the Astros, and we were going to be a final. And I thought we were going to have this great week in week 16, being finished in week 17 on the horizon, talking about how we the analysts, we who tell everyone our moves, were in the final of this super hard competition. One of us was going to be looking to be the first person to ever win 3 titles in that league. No, we both get bounced in the semi-finals.
I think I scored.
Oh my God.
Played of games that day, I think I scored about 17 points from a quarterback and about 4 other players. Like, I just couldn't, like, I had nothing. Like, it was just like all my players put in their worst performance. It was just so weird.
After he got you there with gravy, right? He goes and scores something like 90 points in 2 weeks in the lead up. So it's a tough pill to swallow. But Josh Allen, okay, so it's the second game where he has the 3 rushing touchdowns, the 3 passing touchdowns. That's the one that I'm specifically mentioning, but you could have brought up the week before as well. Mate, you went a different direction with your best fantasy performance of the year. We've talked enough about Josh Allen, and I know where he hurt you. You don't have to show me on the doll, mate. I know. But your player here, he's been great all year. He just happened to have one where he blew the freaking doors off the barn. Talk to us about it.
The Josh Allen doll has a ripped arsehole. The arsehole's gone. But this one, mate, it was just me watching it just in awe. I was just like, I remember it being early. It was a Thursday night football game, and it was just like, if you had this guy, your matchup was over. Like, everyone who was playing against this guy, they knew they were done. So we've already brought him up. It was Jamar Chase against the Ravens when he had 11 for 264 and 3. I was just and they were like, and especially in the leagues where you got boosts for long touchdowns, I think all these touchdowns, if not like 2 of them, were like the 70 yarders or something. Like, it was just like, if you've got a boost for long touchdowns, this guy, I think in that league that I'm in with Joshy, I think he scored like 65 or something. Like,
oh my God.
Insane. Like, it just like, it was over for your matchup if you had him that week. And it was just, it was poetry in motion. Honestly, it was another one of those ones where the Bengals defense was just getting torched and Burrow had to keep up, and it just worked out perfectly for Chase. I think Higgins missed that game too. Like, he missed the game. So Chase was a sort of a one-man band in that game, and he was so dominant.
Yeah, but you think, why the fuck are they covering Chase? You've got Yoshivash and fucking Gesicki out there. Who the fuck else are you covering? What is wrong with you?
Breakdowns. It was like, if you took away those like three ridiculously big plays, his yards per catch weren't enormous. Like they were kind of keeping in front of him until they weren't. It was like, they have him for 5 or 6 yards, and then all of a sudden one fucking player falls down or just doesn't cover him, and he's gone for 70 yards. Like it was like a few massive plays.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like that ends your fantasy matchup on a Thursday night. But, mate, if you just added his 3 touchdowns and his 11 catches, that's almost 30 fantasy points there, let alone the 26.4 he gets for the yardage as well. So it's just an absurd day. It's hard to go past in terms of a wide receiver performance. I definitely think it's worth talking about in fantasy performance of the year. Again, I don't think we need to decide one or the other. They're fantastic. It's just they're both worth bringing up.
Yep, absolutely, mate.
This is the one. This is the big one. Yeah. We talk about who we think is the fantasy player of the year. And, mate, I don't know. We asked a lot of people, who's your favourite fantasy player of all time in our 5-question segment this year? And a lot of people brought up guys who they had do something significant for them on the way to either championships or deep runs into playoffs. And that's kind of something that helped, for me, really narrow down who I thought was going to be really worthy of this. It's like, okay, so who in a few years is going to talk about this person this year, and this might be why they're their favourite fantasy player of all time. So I kind of took that into my thinking about it.
Yeah, and the way I kind of, like the hard thing when you're just looking at the fantasy player of the year, it's a mix-up between working out guys that were far better than their ADP. Yeah. That's a huge value, but then it's also looking at guys that, hey, they might have been drafted sort of at the bottom of the first round or something, and did they completely, like, were they a league winner? Like, it's kind of trying to work out which one made the bigger difference. And I definitely had, a few guys in mind here, but I just think there was one guy that just sort of came to my mind first, and I just think he was so dominant and he helped so many, fantasy players get to the promised land.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, I guess I'm thinking about it in the same way, in a lot of the same ways. But, mate, I don't know. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? How do you want this to go?
What if we went 1, 2, 3 and said the name?
Oh, okay. I'm in.
Because we don't know. We don't know who each other's got. No? We don't know if it's going to be the same. We don't know.
We got no idea. All Tay knows is that I joked that it was Chris Boswell earlier today.
And look, I would have had no issues.
But I then had to confess, no, it's somebody who I've already mentioned in my list of awards I've given out tonight. And Tay hasn't even given me that much about his. So, it's time. It's time. Let's do the unveil.
Absolutely.
All right, you count us in?
Yep. 1, 2, 3, Saquon Barkley.
Josh Allen. Oh! I can't disagree with you, Tay.
Yeah, I brought it up earlier, the stats about how many fantasy players went to the finals with him. He seemed like a CMC 2.0 from the year before. I just think, even though you were drafting him sort of the end of a first, I still think the value was there for just absolute dominant running back one performance this year. He was insanely consistent. You didn't really get many games where you weren't sort of beating the shit out of your opponent at running back because he was on your team. I just felt like week to week you felt better knowing that he was on your team. I think for me too, knowing that I took him in so many leagues and it helped me get such a good record, at least in the regular season, it was hard for me to not go him because I saw the fruit of taking him where he was going. I'm also just proud of myself for the call on him, and it made me sort of feel like, all right, this is a guy that I put all my chips on. I had brought up all the reasons as to why I thought when he was going at running back 8 in fantasy in the drafts, I thought it was too low. A lot of people...
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Because it was a change of a team. He was getting older. He's got injury issues. He didn't look great at the Giants, blah, blah, blah. There was so many reasons why people were doubting him, and he just completely blew it out of the water. So I just think I think it was about 40 points in front of second in the running back position. And, yeah, I just think the fact that he was going to break the single-season record for rushing if they had let him, I just think it was such a dominant performance this year that he deserved the Fantasy Player of the Year from me.
I think that was a foregone conclusion too, that if he plays on the weekend, he needs 101 yards against the Giants. He's going to get about 301 yards. But why I get why they're not going to press that. They've got bigger ambitions than just a single season record for a player. They want to win the ring, and he is so pivotal to that. So don't trot him out in the game. You don't need him to. I mean, I'd like to report a murder because Saquon Barkley didn't just do it running forwards, running downhill, catching balls out of the backfield. He reversed jump hurdled people. I mean, oh my God. I got front row seat of that because it was a Jags game. And while that was happening, and I don't know, I get up in the morning and I put the Jags game on, and I have to keep up with what Manjot's talking about if I need to know what's going on in Red Zone because I just watched the Jags. So I was watching that game when it happened, and I just could not believe what I was seeing. And I mean, that is going to be replayed till Kingdom Come, till absolute Kingdom Come. Another player I think is going to get replayed to Kingdom Come goes to the player who I named as Fantasy Player of the Year, which is Josh Allen. If you can get a passing touchdown and a receiving touchdown on the same play, then you probably deserve a little bit of credit for it. But also, I mean, it was in that diabolical run where he scored nothing but 30-point games for about 6 straight weeks and culminated with them just getting higher and higher, steeper and steeper as he went until, as you say, Tay, in week 16, he kind of hurt you a bit. But I'm willing to forgive a week 16 failure, considering all the things Josh Allen did to get you there at the time of the year where even if you start a bit rocky, he was a deodorant that fixed everything, and it didn't matter if you were struggling a bit at a second position. He did enough to cover you, and he did it so consistently for such a long time that, mate, if you got to your fantasy playoffs with Josh Allen, then you owed him a huge debt of gratitude. There is probably worlds where people did it with Josh Allen and Saquon Barkley, and they're kind of laughing at us mentioning them both because they're just blessed with the royalty of having been completely embarrassed with the amount of options they've got there and having such luxury of point scoring. So I love your call. Saquon was by a mile the best running back. Josh Allen wasn't the best quarterback in terms of fantasy points, but there's a lot of case to make about why he was so valuable. Mate, if we had to split them, I'd very happily come to your camp and just give it to Saquon as a gong. He's had an incredible year.
Yeah, and look, the thing about Josh Allen too is I don't know if it's possible for you to have had him and not made the playoffs, because even if he was struggling after like week 10, that run he put together for like 4 weeks from like week 11 to week 14, there's no way you probably lost any of those games. So it's like you could have been like, I don't know, 3-6 or something and stormed home with him and went 7-6. Or like I find it hard to even imagine how you would have actually not made the playoffs with him, because he was just so consistent and then had that ridiculously dominant period when you exactly needed him leading into the playoffs of fantasy. Yes, he had the disappearing act in week 16, but the weeks leading in when you really needed to win those games, that's when he was at his best. So I can see why you'd be happy with him.
100%. I think there's a weight of a crown when you are drafted as the number one player at a position to return it. And he didn't, but gee, he did everything else. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to reward him for that.
I don't think anyone that's drafted him was annoyed until
100%. But mate, we are now at a position where we're kind of out of things to talk about for the fantasy season. It's over. People have won championships. I'm going to quickly ask you, mate, because, well, you know, we talked about it so much in the lead up as our last subject for the year. You made 13 playoffs from 13 leagues. You found yourself in 9 semi-finals. You then progressed to 5 finals. Do you win any championships, Tay?
Yeah, I ended up with 3, mate. And I say that acting like it wasn't an amazing achievement, and I'm very proud of it. Like, I won 3 last year.
Well done, mate.
I was stoked. And then this year to win 3, it really is just as good as an achievement, really. It felt like it was a little bit of a disappointment given how good my regular season was. Like, I just don't think I'll ever have a regular season like that ever again. Like, to have 13 leagues and make the playoffs in all 13, it feels like a statistical anomaly that I couldn't possibly repeat. So I don't know if I'll ever have that good opportunity to win as many titles as possible. But again, to win 3 out of 13, it's a very good strike rate given, like, I've probably got an average of somewhere between 10 and 12 players in each of my leagues. It's a very good strike rate. So it's something I'm very proud of. I've often said that I kind of look at my regular season results more than how many titles I have, because I feel like over a 14-week, timeline, that's when you can sort of work out whether you've done the right things over a long period of time. Whereas when you get to the playoffs, it's very hit and miss. Like you can just be out in 1 week and it's over. So I kind of I prided myself on that. And then when it got to the playoffs, I was like, you know what? I've done the work. It happens. It happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's kind of how it happens. So very proud of my season, more so for the regular season, more so than the actual 3 titles. But again, winning 3 titles, nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, 100%. Sometimes the journey is the destination and not the championship. Yep. So I feel like my year was like that too. I was in 14 leagues and, most of them are dynasties. And I'm just kind of on that stage now with some of these dynasties where actually these teams are starting to become, let's not say they're contending. They're definitely becoming teams that can win some games. And I found myself in 7 playoffs and then found myself in 5 semis, 3 finals. And mate, I won one of them. And it wasn't the highest stakes league, but I'm happy to win one. The league that I was the most bullish about was our Astro League, where it's a league where 110 should win you 85% of your matchups. And I went and threw up 136 in the semi-final, only to lose to the eventual champion who threw up 168. 168. It was the second highest score in playoff history. And then he goes out in the final and throws up 170. So actually eclipses the playoff scoring record. And that was Jolio, who we had on much earlier in the year. In fact, if you catch the week 9 show, you catch him there. He goes on, has a historic run. He goes and wins. He won the first Astro League. He now goes and wins the 15th Astro League. We're just a Joel sandwich, mate. He's the bread, and we're all in between. And I think this is the thing, right? There was nothing I could have done. My team was incredibly good. They played a good week, and I just got beaten by the buzzsaw. And then the guy after me got beaten by the same buzzsaw. So sometimes your success isn't about your result. I was incredibly proud. We made the final last year, Manjot and I think my team this year was better and deserved it more, even though I didn't make the final. So this is the thing. Like, it just depends on how you judge how your season went. But I felt like this season actually more successful than last year.
For sure. And I'll just point out 2 of my leagues that I was probably the most proud of were ones I didn't actually win the title in. And one was obviously the keeper league that I sort of got handed the team like literally days before the draft. Got given the worst team in the league and then was given...
not close.
And
not close. Easily the worst team.
The commissioner obviously had some issues with the draft, and I ended up getting the last pick instead of the first with the worst team, which was kind of just a clusterfuck of situation. My running back 1 was Devin Singletary. I had to keep him in this team because of how bad the running back situation was.
You have to keep 7. That's the problem with that league. You had to keep 7, even though probably 3 of them were worthwhile.
Yeah, it was a huge year of waiver wire ads, and I think I went on an 8-game winning streak in that league to take a first round bye. Obviously, ended up going down to you in the semi-final, but it was one of those things where I was just incredibly proud of the fact that I was even there. Like, it was absurd. I've got some guys I'm pretty happy to keep for next year now too, and something to build on because of like the situation I was put in. It could have easily just been the worst team in the league again, but I felt like I hit the waiver wire. I did everything I talked about on the podcast, turned that around. And just quickly, my FFL Dynasty League, which I laughed about today, they did the draft order, and I've basically been the number 1 pick for the last 2 years, or plus 3 years, really. And all of a sudden this year, I made it to the semi.
You did.
But put up a pretty good score in that semi too. But I've now got a bunch of young guys that I feel like I've set my team up for the future. Like, I've got Brock Bowers, I've got Brian Thomas, I've got Jackson Smith and Jigba. Just a lot of guys that I'm really, really pumped on. Bijan Robinson. Like, I feel like it's a team that's success for the next 2 or 3 years. So I felt like I built it very well with all the draft picks and sort of, bottomed out at the right time. And I'm in a situation now in that league that I feel like I can turn it around, and I'll probably be a buyer at this point, not a seller.
How about that? And this is a great thing. You spend all that time being a seller and accumulating that draft capital. You go and you invest well. Now you can start selling future drafts to go and try and get that title.
It's fun being a seller, honestly, during all that time. But when you get to this point, you feel like you've worked your ass off to actually turn your team into this. It becomes even more fun because you're like, I really actually picked all these players, and they kind of feel like they're your family in a way because you've drafted them from the get-go.
Seen them grow up, Tay.
You've watched them look like shit, although outside of Bowers and Thomas, they haven't really ever looked like shit yet. But like you've had your struggles at the start, and then they've turned into these amazing prospects. And yeah, that was another league that I've been horrendous in the last few years by design, and then it's sort of all turned around this year. So it's a couple of leagues, even though I didn't win them, that I was pretty proud of the results.
And it shows you that success, I mean, and I run distances and sometimes ultra distances, and they say that when you turn up on race day, that's actually like the victory lap. You've actually done the race over the previous 6 months, however long you've been training for. And I think fantasy football is a lot the same. It doesn't actually matter where you finish on the day. I've never won a race in my life. I turn up for these things and I don't even come close to the front. But just completing the season and feeling proud about what you do, and gaining the knowledge along the way and trying things out is, the journey is absolutely the destination with fantasy football. So that said, I'm looking forward to catching you all next year round, and hopefully you'll come and join us for our pre-season slate of stuff. We do this every year where we start talking about rookies in about July. We start talking about players who we think we're interested in, where they move teams, and what free agent moves we think are going to be impactful. And then we start getting into the divisional breakups and start talking about what we think we can expect from teams in each division, fantasy-wise, in the lead-up to the season. Prior to that, Tay, we've actually still got a bit going on in the network. Want to give a little sneak peek about what's coming up in the next month?
Yeah, look, we've done this last couple of years, but last year was kind of the one where we had everyone, obviously the network got bigger, and we're able to do a big fantasy game as well as obviously do an AGN, a G'day Gridiron style preview of all the playoff games. So we're able to sort of just delve into the real NFL side of it and talk about the matchups and talk about why we think one team's going to, get the wood over the other. And it's really cool to just preview it that way. And then on the second show, it's sort of more of a fantasy style where we do another game like we did sort of similar to starts of the week, but you can pick anyone, and obviously we'll have to retool it depending on how many guys we actually end up having come on. But in the end, we'll be picking teams each like we do in starts of the week, and it's going to be a scoring system, and that's always really fun because it gives you something extra to watch during the playoffs. So it's going to be cool doing both, talking about real NFL and that side of it, but then also delving into the fantasy side of it as well.
Jimmy, so great. I'm looking forward to that. So on behalf of me, Matty C, I just want to firstly thank you, Tay, for your enduring work all season long, for your good humour, and for putting up with me. And then when you don't have to put up with me, for all the things that you've done to try and keep the show going for a couple of weeks where I was battling there. Mate, I'm really indebted to you, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you so we can do some exchange of some silverware, but also I can eat a bunch of water that I definitely owe you.
For sure, mate. Yeah, can't wait to get down there. I'm back at work next week, and then I'm going to probably do a camp trip later in the month. And yeah, mate, just again, thank you to everyone that's come on the podcast. And I sort of brought it up a few times already, but I can't say it enough. Like, you guys made the podcast this year what it was. It was fantastic. All the stuff you brought, it made the podcast so amazing. I know I've brought it up a lot of times on the podcast, but in the group, but it really means a lot to me, all you guys coming on. It made the sort of, idea I had in my head come to fruition. I just still can't believe it happened to move as it did. I really thought there was going to be more issues with it, and it wasn't. You guys got them when you said you were going to be on, and yeah, it was just such a great work. Thank you again to you, Matty C. Like I said, you do so much work for the show, and it doesn't go unnoticed. And honestly, for you to get your starts of the week title, I think you really, really deserved it. So thanks again for an amazing year, mate.
Thank you, mate. And this is something that I was doing a bit of tidying up. I'm having some work done around the house the next week or so, but I dug out an old set of folders that had some of our buy low, sell high and starts of the week stuff in it from 2021. So I've kept it. I don't know. This is the thing about being a son of two historians, is I keep all kinds of hopeless shit. So I've squirreled some of that away to bring out later on when I'm a much older, grizzled man, for us to laugh at over a beer one day when we're much older and grayer. But I thought you'd get a kick out of hearing that. Here I am with these pieces of paper that have me trying to make a case for Matt Ryan in 2021. Very good. Very good.
Probably a Jarek McKinnon there or something.
Oh, mate, it's a disaster. I'll screenshot some stuff and send it to you. But anyhow, mate, look, I'm going to let you get out of here. You've been a great soldier for us all year long, and nobody deserved a week off more than you last week. And I'm looking forward to hanging out with you through the playoffs. Mate, the great thing about our teams as NFL fans is we are not burdened by bias when it comes to the NFL playoffs because our guys are safely at home. So I'm looking forward to doing the playoffs with you and taking home whatever the prizes are and whatever competitions there are for us in the AGN stuff. Because, mate, we're not going to be burdened by having to worry about our fandom getting in the way.
No bias from us, mate. Well, it's straight shooters.
No 49ers to rail against this year. I voted against 49ers in everything I did last year just for funsies. What am I going to do? I'm going to have to take a real analysis for those.
It's devastating for you. You can't just go against one team the entire time. You can try, but it won't be with as much gusto as you do against the Niners.
No. Maybe I should aim up Packers fans this year or something. I don't know. I don't know. We'll work it out. It's going to be someone from the NFC, let's face it. But thank you again, mate. In the meantime, we'll catch everybody on the AGN Playoff Shows. You'll find them coming up soon with some great social media as well. We've been messing around a bit with some of the theatre there. But you can find everything that we do. Linktree/Aussie Gridiron Network. It is where you will catch Pastry Press NFL. Manjot has been going hard with social media. Please find him, subscribe, like everything he does. He does short form, long form. He does all the wonderful little YouTube shorts as well. He's terrific. Go and find him at Pastry Press NFL on YouTube and through Linktree/Aussie Gridiron Network. You can also buy a whole bunch of cool merchandise from the Aussie Gridiron Network merch store, and you can catch everything we do, every show we have ever done. There is 500, Tay, you won't believe this, there's 571 episodes on the Aussie Gridiron Network channel on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Sometimes I find it fun to go back a year and just listen to the same week last year just for shits and gigs to see who was in our starts of the week teams, and it never fails to this point. So if you're kind of feeling a bit of a hankering for some football talk in this long off season, feel free to go back and dig into some old episodes. Some great stuff in there, Tay.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool thing to do because the names that come up, you're like, holy shit, how are those coming up? But they were very relevant at the time. So,
100%. 100%. If you want to scroll far enough down, you get Astro League stuff where you can hear Taylor talking about Todd Gurley in the playoffs for the Falcons. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah, you get some sweet rhymes like you just heard on tonight's episode too.
And we'll be back next year with a fully revamped Aussie NFL Fantasy Show with some fun segments, new guests, a whole bunch of great stuff. Plus, starts of the week will always be a staple here. It's what we know that you love to hear, so we're going to continue that. Tay, thank you so much for everything you've done this year. Hooroo!
Dicks on the floor. Thank you, 2024. Thank you.
This is the Aussie NFL Fantasy Show.
It kind of forces us deeper into the Phillip Rivers ball bag, or the Tyreek ball bag these days, I guess.
With the theme of the episode, Matty, could be the Wilt Chamberlain ball bag too.
Fantasy Wilt Chamberlain, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, hopefully without the STDs, of course.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Aussie?
So if they'd realised this earlier, we could have been like pegging you back rather than just you pegging us.
NFL?
It just hasn't been there this year. It just doesn't have hands.
You're my handcuff now, eh?
Oh, yeah, handcuff, mate.
Fantasy.
Don't be a Brenton stranger and give us a follow.
You're tossing 2 tight ends and 2 quarterbacks. How many hands do you have?
This is the Aussie NFL Fantasy Show.
Cole Komet.
Cole Metcalf.
I feel like a twoies, but